Water delivery is one of those jobs people rarely think about. You follow a route, carry heavy containers, and move on to the next stop. But some deliveries happen early in the morning or late at night to places where no one should be awake. In this video, you'll hear three scary horror stories from water delivery workers, moments that started like any normal drop off and slowly turned into something disturbing. If you enjoy horror stories like this, like the video and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel even more, super thanks are always appreciated.
I have been working from home since before it was popular. My wife, Sarah, works long hours at the hospital, which leaves me in charge of the house and our 2-year-old daughter, Emily. When you spend 24 hours a day in the same building, you develop a rhythm. You know the exact rumble of the mail truck, the specific screech of the garbage disposal, and the schedule of every delivery that comes to your door. We relied heavily on a premium water delivery service. The tap water in our subdivision is notoriously hard. It ruins coffee and tastes like swimming pool chemicals. So we subscribed to one of those services that brings the 5-gallon jugs every Tuesday morning. For 3 years, our driver was a guy named Mike. Mike was great. He was older, chatted about football, gave treats to our golden retriever, and always followed the instructions. Leave the full bottles on the front porch, take the empties. I never had to unlock the door. It was seamless. Then, about a month ago, Mike stopped coming. There was no email notification, no warning. Just a Tuesday morning where the usual 10 a.m. drop-off didn't happen. Around 2:30 p.m., a van I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. It wasn't the branded blue truck with the company logo. It was a beat-up white cargo van with rust eating away at the wheel wells. I watched from my office window. A man stepped out. He was nothing like Mike. This guy was massive, probably 6'5", wearing a dirty generic uniform that looked 2 sizes too small. He didn't walk. He stopped. I watched him literally drag the 3 heavy water jugs up my concrete driveway, scraping the plastic the whole way. I went downstairs but didn't open the door. I just watched the security camera feed on my phone. He didn't leave the bottles on the porch. He stood there, staring at the front door. He stood motionless for a full minute. Then he leaned in close to the camera, his face filling the frame. He had greasy hair and eyes that looked bloodshot and frantic. He pressed the doorbell and held it down. I opened the door, leaving the storm door locked. "Can I help you?" "Water," he grunted. His voice was deep and gravelly. "Need to bring him inside. New policy. Temperature regulation." That sounded like absolute garbage. "No thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Just leave them there. I'll bring them in later." He didn't move. He just stared at me, then his eyes drifted over my shoulder, scanning the hallway behind me. "You got a dog?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, stepping to the side to block his view. "And he's not friendly. Just leave the bottles." He finally relented, leaving the jugs and taking the empties, but he did it with an aggression that unsettled me. He threw the empty bottles into the back of his van with enough force to dent the metal. That week, things felt off. The water tasted fine at first, maybe a little sweeter than usual, but I chalked it up to a filter change at the plant. The strange part was how tired we were. Sarah is used to being exhausted from her shifts, but I was sleeping through my alarms. Even Emily, who usually wakes up crying at 2 a.m. like clockwork, was sleeping 12 hours straight. We were in a fog. I remember waking up one morning feeling like my limbs were made of lead, my head pounding with a dull pressure. The next Tuesday, the white van returned. I made sure to stay in my office. I didn't want to talk to him. I watched him drop off the bottles and leave. But later that afternoon, when I went to put the new jug on the dispenser, I noticed a tiny scratch on the plastic cap. I didn't think much of it. I peeled the seal off, flipped it onto the cooler, and we went about our week. The lethargy got worse. I started having gaps in my memory. I would be working at my desk and realize an hour had passed where I had just been staring at the wall. Sarah was sleeping through her phone ringing. The dog, usually a ball of energy, spent the entire day snoring on the rug. It came to a head yesterday. I went into the garage to grab the last bottle from the previous delivery. As I lifted it, the sunlight from the garage window hit the bottom of the jug at the perfect angle. There was a dot, a tiny black marker dot on the underside of the bottle. I frowned and set it down. I checked the empty ones I was about to put out. They all had it. A small, almost invisible black dot. A cold feeling, sharper than the winter air, pricked the back of my neck. I looked at the cap of the fresh bottle. The seal looked intact, but I grabbed a magnifying glass from my workbench and looked closer. There, right in the center of the blue plastic cap, was a hole. It was microscopic, a pinprick. Someone had taken a syringe, injected something into the sealed bottle, and then smoothed the plastic over. The heat from their thumb would have been enough to seal the hole against leaks, but the puncture remained. I felt like I was going to throw up. I ran inside and grabbed the bottle currently on the dispenser. I ripped it off, water splashing everywhere. I checked the cap. The puncture was there. We had been drinking it for weeks. My phone chimed. It was a notification from the front door camera. Motion detected. It was Tuesday. He was early. I looked at the feed. The white van was in the driveway, but he wasn't taking the bottles out. He was standing by the driver's side door, putting on leather gloves. He looked toward the house, and for the first time, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a predator's grin. He reached into the van and pulled out a crowbar. He knew. Somehow he knew the dosage was peaking. He knew we should be unconscious. I screamed for Sarah to grab Emily and lock themselves in the master bathroom. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep behind the coat rack and ran to the kitchen. I heard the heavy boots on the porch steps. Then the door handle jiggled. Locked. Delivery. He shouted. The voice wasn't gravelly anymore. It was mocked excitement. Open up. I know you're in there. I know you're sleeping. The first hit with the crowbar shook the entire door frame. Wood splintered onto the floor. I'm calling the police. I screamed, my voice cracking. I have a gun. I didn't have a gun. The pounding stopped. Silence. Then I heard him laugh. You don't have a gun, Dad? You have a bat. I saw it through the window last week. He hit the door again. Crack. The deadbolt casing was giving way. I could see daylight through the gap. I retreated to the stairs, gripping the bat until my knuckles turned white. The door flew open. He stepped inside, the crowbar resting casually on his shoulder. He looked huge in the hallway. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of our home. You have nice things, he whispered. Shame you're awake. It's Messier when you're awake. He took a step toward me. I braced myself to swing. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance, loud and getting closer. A neighbor must have seen him breaking down the door. His face fell. The arrogance vanished, replaced by animal panic. He looked at me, then at the open door. He snarled, a guttural sound of frustration, and turned on his heel. He sprinted back to the van, tires squealing, as he reversed blindly into the street and sped away. The police arrived 2 minutes later. They found the vials in the back of his van when they caught him 3 towns over. It wasn't just sleeping pills. It was a cocktail of sedatives and muscle relaxers. He had a notebook with a list of 5 families on his route. We were number 3. Next to our name he had written, Phase 2, Extraction. I don't know what extraction meant. I don't want to know. The water company had no record of him. He had unalive Mike 3 weeks ago and assumed his route. We are moving. I can't stay in a house where a stranger watched us sleep, waiting for the right moment to come in and collect us. and I will never, ever drink water that I didn't pour from the tap myself.
When you are a broke college student living in a shoebox apartment, you learn to navigate the world of cheap. I cut corners everywhere. I ate instant noodles, stole toilet paper from the campus library, and refused to pay for bottled water at the grocery store. Instead, I used those standalone water kiosks. You've seen them, the boxy metal machines sitting in the dark corners of gas station parking lots. 25 cents a gallon. There was one specific machine I used. It was located behind an abandoned car wash on the edge of town. It was sketchy, desolate, and the overhead light was always broken, but it was the only one that still cost a quarter. The ones closer to campus had hiked their prices to 50 cents. So once a week, usually late at night to avoid the traffic, I drove my beat-up Civic out there with a trunk full of empty plastic jugs. It was a Thursday, just past 1 a.m., a heavy, suffocating mist had settled over the town, the kind that dampens sound and makes the streetlights look like blurry halos. I pulled into the lot. It was empty, as always. The only light came from the flickering blue LED display of the water machine. I popped the trunk and grabbed my 4 5-gallon jugs. The air was dead silent. No crickets, no distant highway noise. Just the hum of the machine when I plugged in my quarters. I leaned against my car, scrolling through my phone while the first jug filled. I felt exposed. The parking lot backed up to a dense line of woods, pitch black and impenetrable. I kept glancing at the tree line, feeling that primal itch between my shoulder blades that says you are being watched. I shook it off. Paranoia is a side effect of too much caffeine and not enough sleep. I switched the jugs. One full, one empty. Clunk. Whir. Hiss. I was on the third jug when the machine made a noise I hadn't heard before. A grinding, metallic screech, like gears stripping. The water flow sputtered, then surged. It came out with such pressure that it knocked the heavy jug out of the filling bay. The jug hit the pavement, cracking open. Water gushed out. "Great," I muttered, reaching to hit the emergency stop button. I pressed it. Nothing happened. I pressed it again harder. The button was stuck. It felt like someone had glued it in place. The water kept coming. It wasn't just a stream anymore. It was a fire hose. The machine was groaning, vibrating violently against the concrete pad. Water was flooding the parking lot, soaking my sneakers, pooling around my tires. I looked for a shut-off valve, but there wasn't one. On the side of the machine, near the coin slot, was a sticker, 24-hour emergency maintenance. Call 555-0199. I didn't want to leave the machine spewing water. I didn't want to get charged for 1,000 gallons or something ridiculous. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. It rang once, then a click. "Yeah," a voice answered. It wasn't a professional greeting. No water coast service or "how can I help you?" Just a raspy, wet voice, like the speaker had a throat full of phlegm. Hello?" I said, shivering as the cold water soaked my jeans. "I'm at the kiosk behind the old car wash on 4th Street. The machine is broken. It won't stop pumping. The stop button is jammed." There was a silence on the other end. It stretched on for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I thought the call had dropped. "Hello?" I asked again. "I know it's jammed," the voice said. My stomach dropped. "What?" "The button," the man said. "I know it's jammed." I used super glue. I froze. My brain tried to process the information. A prank? A disgruntled employee? Why would you do that? I asked, my voice trembling. "Because," the voice rasped, sounding closer now. "The noise of the water is loud. It's very loud. It covers up the sound. I took a step back toward my car door. What sound? The sound of the glass breaking. My passenger side window exploded inward. I screamed, dropping the phone into the puddle at my feet. I spun around. A figure had emerged from the darkness of the car wash bay. He was dressed in a heavy rubber raincoat and a ski mask. He was holding a tire iron. He wasn't running. He was walking. He was calm. He knew I was trapped. I scrambled for my driver's side door. I grabbed the handle and yanked. Locked. I had locked the car out of habit when I got out. My keys were in my pocket. The man was 10 feet away. He raised the tire iron. He didn't say a word. The only sound was the roar of the overflowing water machine, drowning out my panic. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking so violently I dropped them. They splashed into the water. He was 5 feet away. I dove to the ground, scrabbling in the dark, freezing water. My fingers brushed the metal key ring. I grabbed it, rolled onto my back, and kicked out just as he swung. The tire iron smashed into the pavement inches from my head, sending sparks flying. I scrambled up, jammed the key into the lock, and threw the door open. He lunged, grabbing the hood of my sweatshirt. I felt his grip tighten, choking me. I threw my weight forward, tearing the fabric, and tumbled into the driver's seat. I slammed the door and hit the lock just as the tire iron slammed into the window. The glass spiderwebbed but held. I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over, sputtered, and died. He was circling the car now. He walked to the front, raised the iron, and smashed the headlights. Darkness swallowed me, save for the flickering blue light of the water machine. I tried the ignition again. Please, please. The engine roared to life. I threw it into reverse, not caring about the jugs, the water, or the damage. I floored it. I heard a sickening thump as the back of my car hit him. I didn't stop to check. I spun the wheel and tore out of the parking lot, driving blindly over the curb and onto the main road. I drove with my high beams on, doing 80 in a 30 zone until I reached a police station. When the cops went back, the man was gone. But the scene told a horrifying story. The machine had been tampered with, just like he said. The stop button was glued. The internal regulator had been bypassed to ensure maximum flow and noise. But it was what they found in the maintenance access panel that haunts me. The killer hadn't just been hiding in the car wash. He had been living inside the machine's maintenance housing. There was a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, and a stack of wallets. 7 wallets, all belonging to people who had gone missing in the county over the last 6 months. He used the water. He used the noise. He waited for people like me alone, distracted, seeking something cheap and easy. He drowned out their screams with the sound of rushing water. I don't drink water from those machines anymore. I don't care how broke I am. I'll drink from the bathroom tap. I'll drink from a hose. But I will never stand in a dark parking lot, listening to the machine hum, wondering who is waiting for the water to start flowing.
I spent the summer after my sophomore year of college working the closing shift at a place called Pure Source. It was a sterile, brightly lit storefront in a dying strip mall on the edge of the industrial district. The job was the definition of monotonous. My entire existence revolved around the hum of industrial reverse osmosis filters and the rhythmic thump-thump of the pumps. The air in there always smelled like ozone and heavy-duty floor cleaner. It was the kind of job that was so quiet it made your ears ring. My boss, Mr. Henderson, was a man obsessed with the standard. He took water purification with a level of seriousness that bordered on the fanatical. The floors had to be buffed until they mirrored the fluorescent lights. The stainless steel filling stations had to be wiped down after every single customer. But his biggest rule was about the containers.
We were only supposed to fill clear, blue-tinted, food-grade polycarbonate bottles. If you can't see what's inside, you don't put our water in it, he'd tell me. He was terrified of someone bringing in an old gasoline can or a pesticide jug and then suing us when they got sick. But then there was the man we called the Jerry Can Guy. His name on the account was just Blackwood. He was the only exception to Henderson's rule. Why? Because Blackwood didn't just fill a couple of bottles. He filled 10 5-gallon industrial jerry cans every single Friday night like clockwork. He paid 3 times the normal rate in cash, and in a strip mall where half the units were boarded up. Henderson wasn't about to turn away a guaranteed payday. Blackwood was a small, wiry man who always looked like he was vibrating at a different frequency than the rest of the world. He wore heavy, oil-stained coveralls, even in the sweltering July heat. His hands were the most unsettling part of him. They were perpetually stained a dark, yellowish-brown, and the skin around his cuticles was raw and peeling, like he spent his days dipping them in bleach. He never spoke more than 2 words at a time. He would pull his beat-up black pickup truck right to the curb, haul those heavy, opaque black jugs inside, and head straight for the high-pressure taps in the back. He was incredibly protective of those jugs. One time, I tried to help him lift one that looked like it was leaking, and he practically hissed at me. He stepped between me and the jug, his eyes wide and wild, and said, "I do it. You stay back." I didn't argue. I just went back to the register and watched him. He would fill them, cap them with these heavy-duty industrial seals he brought himself, and then spend an unusual amount of time hosing down the filling station with the high-pressure nozzle. It was like he was trying to scrub the metal itself away. The night this all went wrong was a Friday in late August. A massive thunderstorm had rolled in off the coast, turning the sky a bruised, sickly purple. By 8:45 p.m., the wind was howling through the gaps in the strip mall's roof, and the rain was hitting the front windows with enough force to make the glass vibrate. I was ready to lock up early, but I knew Blackwood would be coming. At exactly 8:55 p.m., the black truck skidded into the lot. He didn't even park properly. He just left it idling at a weird angle. When he walked in, he looked worse than I'd ever seen him. He was soaked to the bone, his coveralls clinging to his thin frame, and he was shaking. Not just a shiver from the cold, but a full-body tremor. He didn't even look at me. He just started hauling the black jugs in 2 at a time. He was in a massive hurry. He was slamming them under the taps, the water splashing everywhere. He wasn't even waiting for them to fill all the way before capping them and rushing back to the truck. He was muttering under his breath, something rhythmic and repetitive, like a prayer or a list. "Everything okay, Mr. Blackwood?" I asked, trying to sound helpful despite the knot of anxiety forming in my chest. He didn't answer. He just grabbed the last 2 jugs and sprinted out into the rain. A moment later, I heard his truck tires scream as he tore out of the parking lot, leaving a cloud of exhaust and a puddle of oil behind. I walked over to the back to start the nightly cleaning. The power flickered, the lights buzzing and dimming before the emergency generator kicked in with a low, heavy thud. In the dim, yellowish light, I saw it. He had left one. One single black jerry can sat right next to the drain of the filling station. I figured he'd realize it and come back in 5 minutes. I walked over to grab it, planning to set it by the door. I reached down, gripped the handle, and yanked. I nearly threw out my back. The jug didn't budge. I stared at it. 5 gallons of water weighs about 42 pounds. I know that weight by heart. This thing felt like it was filled with lead. I had to use both hands just to heave it up onto the counter. That's when the smell hit me. It wasn't the ozone smell of the shop. It was something heavy and sweet, but with an undercurrent of sharp, stinging chemicals. It smelled like a butcher shop located inside a swimming pool. It was the smell of rot, masked by something much stronger. I looked at the cap. It wasn't sealed correctly. He had been in such a rush that the threads were crossed. I knew Mr. Henderson would unalive me if I let a contaminated jug sit in the store overnight. I decided to pour it out, rinse it, and leave it for him for next week. I gripped the cap and twisted. It gave way with a wet, sucking sound. A puff of yellowish vapor drifted out of the top, and I had to turn my head to keep from gagging. My eyes began to water instantly. I tilted the jug toward the sink to pour it out. A thick, grayish-pink sludge began to glug out of the opening. It was the consistency of melted soft-serve ice cream, but darker. As the sludge hit the stainless steel, I saw something solid roll out with it. It clattered into the sink with a dull, heavy sound. I leaned in, my flashlight cutting through the dim emergency light. It was a human jawbone. There was no skin, no muscle, just a bone, bleached a weird, translucent white, with 3 gold-capped molars still embedded in the sockets. The world seemed to tilt. My brain didn't want to process what I was seeing, but then more pieces followed. A clump of matted hair, a jagged shard of what looked like a rib, and then a finger the skin sloughing off like a wet glove, but the fingernail still perfectly intact, painted a bright, cheerful shade of cherry red. I stumbled back, my boots slipping in the overflow of the sink. I wasn't looking at water. I was looking at a person, or what was left of one. Blackwood wasn't a customer. He was using our high-pressure, purified water and industrial-grade drain system to dilute the acid he used to clean his work. He had been dissolving people in those jugs for months, and I had been the one smiling and ringing him up at the register. The front door chime rang. My heart didn't just race. It stopped. I looked at the front of the store. Through the rain-streaked glass, I saw the black truck. It had come back. Blackwood was standing in the doorway. The wind was blowing the rain in behind him, soaking the floor. He didn't have his hood up anymore. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, desperate terror. He looked at me, then his eyes moved to the open jug on the counter. Then to the sink, where the jawbone was still sitting in the gray sludge. "I forgot one," he said. His voice was a thin, whistling rasp. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I was looking at the box cutter he had pulled from his pocket. He clicked the blade out. The sound was louder than the thunder outside. "You weren't supposed to be curious," he whispered. "Henderson said you were the quiet type. The type that didn't look." He started toward me, stepping over the counter with a surprising, fluid grace. He wasn't a wiry old man anymore. He was a predator who had done this many, many times. I backed away, my hands searching the counter behind me for anything. My fingers closed around the handle of the high-pressure spray nozzle we used to blast the filters. It was connected to a massive tank of pressurized, ozonated water. "Stay back!" I screamed. He didn't stop. He lunged, the box cutter aimed right for my throat. I squeezed the trigger. The nozzle roared. It wasn't a garden hose. It was an industrial tool meant to strip mineral deposits off steel. The jet of water hit him square in the chest, the force of it throwing him backward. He hit the stainless steel racks, the sound of crashing metal echoing through the store. I didn't stop. I aimed for his face. He shrieked as the pressurized stream hit his eyes, blinding him. He was thrashing on the floor, the box cutter skittering away into the shadows. I didn't wait to see if he'd get up. I sprinted for the back office, slammed the heavy door, and locked it. I dived under the desk, my hands shaking so hard I could barely dial 911. "He's in the store," I sobbed into the phone. "He's killing people. Please, God, help me." On the other side of the door, I heard him. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was scratching. A slow, rhythmic scratching at the bottom of the door. Scrape, scrape, scrape. "It doesn't matter," he whispered through the wood. "There are more jugs." So many more jugs. You've been helping me all summer, kid. You're part of it now. The police arrived 6 minutes later. They found me huddled under the desk, still holding the phone. Blackwood was gone. He had vanished back into the storm, leaving the truck and the jugs behind. When the forensics team processed the store, they found the remains of 4 different people in those 10 jerry cans. The sludge was a mixture of industrial-grade lye and a specialized acid that reacts violently with purified water to accelerate decomposition. But the worst part wasn't the discovery. It was the realization. They checked the store's water meter. Blackwood had been using over 200 gallons a week for nearly a year before I started working there. I moved to a different state. I don't work in service anymore. I can't stand the smell of clean, sterile rooms. And every time I pass one of those water refilling stations, the ones with the clear blue bottles and the happy, bubbling water, all I can think about is what might be hidden inside a container you can't see through. I think about the girl with the cherry red fingernails and how I was the one who helped wash her away.
And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.